Hey guys, time to get in on the action for the biggest moments in basketball with Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projections, place your entry, and win up to 100 times your money. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit of up to $100. Just download the Prize Picks app and use the code GET100. That's code GET100 on Prize Picks for a first deposit match of up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more. Pick less. It's that easy.
This is a More Than Just Podcast production.
Welcome to Spotcast Season 6, Episode 42. My name is Timitra. 42? My name is Timitra, and where am I? I'm in Toronto, Ontario. And who are you? You're Jonathan Kuline, and where are you? Mississauga, Ontario.
Hey, you hit all the check marks. Hello there, kids.
And hey, Jaime, what is 6 times 7?
42. Life,
and
the universe, and everything.
Jaime Lopez Jr. is in Seattle, Washington, Ontario. No, he's not in Seattle, Washington. Ontario is in Seattle, Washington. Oh no, fact check for next week. All right, speaking of fact check, I discovered that Star Trek Discovery is in fact on CTV Sci-Fi, formerly known as Space, on Thursday at 9 p.m. And it also is in the CTV app. We were under the impression we would have to use Paramount Plus to watch it this year, but apparently it is in the, and it reruns on Monday, so Monday at 9 p.m. on the CTV or SCTV, no, what is it? CTV Sci-Fi app channel, Sci-Fi channel. Channel 50 in.
It's very funny though, because if you go to the Paramount app, it very much, the branding on there for Discovery's new season says exclusively on Paramount.
Yeah. But then if it's exclusively on Paramount, how are we exclusively watching it on the CTV app?
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah, go figure. All right, over to you, Jonathan.
Yeah, just a quick facts check. We were talking about the upcoming short animated series that's coming out on Star Wars Day on May the 4th, this weekend for us, last week. And I had said it was called Tales of the Sith. It's not. It's called Tales of the Empire. So there you go. So
you misspoke. You misspoke, as Jar Jar would say.
I wouldn't want to confuse the Sith and the Empire, because sometimes the twain do not intersect. But yes.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Yeah, cool. All right. Well, over to Jaime for the headlines.
Yeah, new thing coming on Disney Plus, a new documentary, Jim Henson Idea Man, about life and times Jim Henson, the creator of the Muppets. It'll be streaming on May 31st, so end of this month. I've enjoyed a bunch of their documentary stuff on Disney Plus that I catch here and there, so looking forward to this one.
Cool. I'm glad they've done something like this. I am a huge Jim Henson fan.
Yeah.
It still saddens me deeply that we didn't get enough of his time. He died so young. And
yeah, how old was he when he died? Do you remember?
I believe he was 50, which hits a little
50.
close to home.
Oh, okay.
As the legend goes, he got sick. He kept working. He was working crazy hours because he was so passionate about his work. He didn't take care of himself. He got an infection and he died. It was far too soon for somebody who had so much incredible creativity and was just clearly an incredible artist. And so I'm really glad that they're doing these kinds of things to recognize, I mean, obviously everybody knows the Muppets, but like there's whole generations now that have lived and enjoyed the Muppets outside of Jim. And it's nice to be able to go back to the beginning and talk about just what an incredible creation and the collaboration that he was able to build with all these other artists. And this is great. I'm so glad they're doing this.
So when I was a kid, I remember watching the Tracy Ullman show and seeing The Simpsons in their first iteration, right? And but then I also remember watching the Ed Sullivan Show and a few other things where the Muppets would show up before. It was well before Sesame Street too, so I remember seeing them in black and white back in the day, right? So it'd be interesting to see this show.
There's a terrific. I'll put in a plug here too. There's a terrific Instagram channel this husband and wife operate called Muppet History, and they constantly are putting up clips from, exactly what you're describing, Tim. Really old clips in black and white of early Jim stuff, or his appearance on talk shows, just all kinds of bits of histories from the Muppets, and every time it crosses my feed, it just puts a smile on my face. It's such wonderful, fresh, funny stuff.
Yeah. And by the way, speaking of hitting close to home, Steve Jobs died at 54.
Yeah. Well,
it's pretty young when you think about it.
It is. Although, again, at least in his case, it was what it was. It was cancer. In Jim's case, it was, you got to take care of yourself. There's a moral in that one.
Yeah. Really, really strange. All right. What other depressing news have you got for us, Jaime?
I don't know. Depressing here. The My Adventures with Superman animated series is going to return on May 25th with a 1-hour premiere of season 2. This one, if folks remember, I described as a pretty fun, enjoyable entry into the Superman mythos, kind of like a young adults sort of version. Fits quite well on the animated areas of Cartoon Network. So there's a lot of history that goes into Superman, a lot of lore and cruft that can be really challenging, I think, for like people just getting into it and who haven't had it for decades. So I really appreciated this take on a Clark Kent who has been Superman but hasn't fully figured all his powers, and buddies and pals with Jimmy Olsen and Lois Lane. Apparently, we're going to get some cool stuff here. I guess spoilers for the trailer. They introduce Lex Luthor, a very young version of Lex Luthor. So should be fun.
Where's that being
Where will we
broadcast?
see this?
Yeah.
Okay, so I got to double check because the ad here on Netflix, sorry, not Netflix, on YouTube says that it's going to be on Adult Swim, Cartoon Network, like on cable in the US, and then streams the next day on Max. I have no clue what that means for Canadians.
Yeah. I mean, we have Adult Swim here, but we don't have...
You get that through some cable channel somewhere?
Yeah, if you have cable, you can get Adult Swim here in Canada. So that's probably where it's at. I don't remember seeing it pop up any of the streaming apps. I don't know that it's streaming anywhere here except for maybe on like Rogers On Demand if you have cable or something like that.
Okay, My Adventures with Superman, according to Just Watch, will be on Global.
Oh, interesting.
Global TV.
All right.
Oh, so not only
Teletoon Plus,
where it's currently at, but where it will be. That's interesting. Okay.
and Stack TV.
So that's so Global is a television network here, and Independent Global is a independent television network, and Stack TV is a streaming app.
And Teletoon Plus, is that a...
Teletoon
like an
Plus, I
Amazon
think,
thing,
is
maybe.
like the it's the online version of obviously Teletoon, which is like Cartoon Channel.
Okay. Well, that's where it's playing here, so
Cool.
No idea when it'll be on.
Yeah, I hope.
Yeah.
I hope I get a chance to catch up with that one. I haven't. I must admit, it falls out of my head because it doesn't just pop. Like so many things just pop up on your streaming services. Like, hey, you should watch this. You like, you like superheroes,
Yeah.
but that one, because I don't really go to the channels, I don't really see it. So I'll have to look that one up.
Okay, so what else you got? You're over, Jonathan. You're up, Jonathan.
Yes. So this one was fun. This week there was a little bit of a back and forth between two of our beloved Avengers. So Chris Hemsworth is doing the rounds because the Furiosa movie is coming out soon. So he was on did an interview with Vanity Fair, and he was talking about just how challenging it was to play Thor and is to play Thor. He said, all these other characters got the best lines, and I just felt like, my character really has a tough time fitting in. And he was kind of critical of just sort of, how his character fit into the big picture. But his coming to the rescue was Iron Man himself, Robert Downey Jr., who basically said, this is a quote, "First off, Thor as a character was super tricky to adapt. Lots of implied limitations, but he and Kenneth Branagh, he being Chris Hemsworth, figured out how to transcend, make him somehow relatable, but godlike. Hemsworth is, in my opinion, the most complex psyche of all of us Avengers. He's got wit and gravitas, but also such restraint, fire, and gentleness." So he basically said, we know you had a tough road to hoe playing this character, but you did it really, really well. So I just wanted to call attention to this one, because so many of these things, you see these stories and it's just like, oh, this person's bad mouthing this person and this person's frustrated with this experience. It was really nice to see one actor sort of saying to the other, like, I know it wasn't your greatest, sometimes you have frustrations with these things, but you did a great job. So I thought this was worth calling attention to, because it's nice to see when you're like, I think we've all been in that spot where you're like, I feel like I didn't do my job as well as I could have. It's nice to have a coworker say, no, man, you're good at your job,
Yeah. Well, it's a good point that he was actually playing a god, and that, to me, it always sort of, when I watch those movies, I'm always like, okay, well, Iron Man's a man, and so-and-so's an alien, and the Hulk is a biological accident or whatever, right? And then you've got people like Miss Marvel, or Captain Marvel, yeah. And Captain Marvel and Helmsworth, who are like Superman and Captain Marvel are like, they're alien people from another planet, blah blah blah. But Helmsworth is like, he's a god. He's like our Greek god,
Yeah.
So Thor is, right. So I always, even though I love the way he played in, which one was the one where he was overweight? Was the Guardians of the Galaxy, or?
No, it was
the
Avengers
belly?
Endgame was the one where he had the big gut. The big
beer belly, he had to go get Peter Dinklage to make him a sword or a new thing or whatever. Yeah. And then this it's actually the 5th anniversary last week of Captain America catching the, what's the name of his hammer again?
Mjolnir.
Mjolnir, yeah, like catching it, and the entire audience going, what the, and cheering, because that just shows you how strong Captain America is, right? That he could wield this thing and take on.
Well, and that he's such
Thanos.
A good person, right? Because the idea is that you have to be worthy to hold Mjolnir.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. It's like the Excalibur kind of deal, right?
Exactly.
Cool.
Yeah, no, like I said, this one sort of, I thought it was very sweet that, this, in this story, he sort of expressed his frustration, and it's nice to hear that Downey sort of talked about that. It also, if you read this story, we'll have the link in here to this sort of summary of it on Variety. Both of those actors have expressed interest in coming back for more Avengers things, even though one of them is dead. So, I think...
or is he?
Yeah. Interesting that it's still good that there's still an interest there. Anyways,
yeah, it's interesting. I watched the last movie on Division Pro when I first got it, because it was available in 3D, right? So it was kind of cool to watch that, in the home theater, as it were. Yeah, and I'd forgotten about the whole demise of Iron Man, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Speaking of which, Iron Man's on TV this weekend. They're doing Iron Man 1, 2, and 3 on Space Channel.
Oh, nice.
Sorry, CTV, Sci-Fi, whatever.
There it is.
Yeah. No, I was looking up to see when one of your picks from the watch list was going to be coming up, and I just, because I was, like you said, it always comes in, or Jaime said last week, it comes in by stealth, and then I always forget to set my PVR and so on and so forth. So, what else you got for us?
Yeah, one more thing here for me. The TV show Heroes, which was a very, for its first season in particular.
Is that the show about the Greek sandwich, the Heroes?
That's right. The popular series from NBC in the early 2000s. It had a 4-season run, and then it ended, and then it was gone, and then it got a little resurgence where they brought it back for a limited series. And now there's a story here from Deadline that Tim Kring, the series creator, is looking at doing a second limited series. He's written something called Heroes Eclipsed. If you'll recall, I don't know how good your memories are, but the solar eclipse is a major part of the original pilot. So especially in the wake of everyone getting all excited about the eclipse that happened recently, apparently this is all tied together. And yeah, they're looking at doing another Heroes series. So they did one in 2015 called Heroes Reborn that sort of brought some of the characters back together. Still not clear what this one's going to really be about, but if you're a fan of Heroes, and I enjoyed the original series, I must admit I didn't watch. I still haven't watched Heroes Reborn, but
was that the one with the carnival guy? Was that the Reborn one?
Again, you're beats me. I haven't watched that one, but I do know that they brought back some of the original characters. It was Jack Coleman's character, Noah Bennett, came back, and then they brought back some of the other characters that sort of in more sort of cameos and bits and pieces. It'd be interesting to see if they can get like more of the band back together for this one. But yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking, remember that Hayden? What was her name? Hayden Panettiere?
Yeah, Hayden Panettiere. Yeah.
Did she? Because she didn't come back for the series. I remember that.
Yeah, and again, there was Greg Grunberg and Spock himself was in that one, right? The new Spock.
Yes, he was. Yes.
Yeah. So.
Quinto.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was the bad guy in the first series, right?
He was the one who kept eating people's brains, right?
Yeah. To get and he would absorb their features, right, or their
powers. Yeah, he could pick up their powers if he ate their brains.
Yeah, nice, good stuff. All right, well, mine's related a bit to we were talking about Phantom Menace coming back to the theaters, and I just stumbled across this. I guess some fan must have posted this on Twitter. A letter from Ron Howard to Newsweek magazine, who before Phantom Menace came out, they had written a review criticizing Jake Lloyd's acting as a 9-year-old. Yeah, I know. And so Ron Howard, just laid into them in this letter saying, I disagree. I think he was an amazing, actor considering his age and, was able to understand emotion. He says, you know what, but, maybe if he doesn't understand, he might have a hard time understanding why you printed this about him, and maybe you should explain it to him. So I don't know if they ever did, but it's just an interesting letter that, like before the movie even hit the ground, Newsweek had planted this idea that it was a flop, whatever, right? Or because of this kid's acting.
Well,
admittedly, yeah.
If you followed the ongoing story of Jake, he's had a lot of mental health issues through his life. I actually read a story about him not that long ago, talking about how, he has had to go into, in treatment programs and stuff like that. Like, it's not funny. Leave the poor guy alone. He and Ahmed Best should be left alone.
Of this?
No, I think I think this may have played a factor into it, but
right.
He is somebody who has struggled with his mental health. As somebody who struggles with his mental health, leave him alone. Come on.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, we saw the story last year about Ahmed Best, who played Jar Jar, who was, contemplating suicide because he was so upset about people hating his character. Just come on,
really?
Get over yourselves. Yes, I don't care for Jar Jar. No, I didn't really love all parts of Jake Lloyd's performance, but come on, leave them alone.
Yeah. I mean, in Jar Jar's defense, I mean, that was the character as it was written and directed and whatever, right? So you can't blame the actor.
Your nephews, my cousins, were also when they were little, they loved Jar Jar so much they named their dog Jar Jar.
Yeah, that's true.
It wasn't for us. It was for some people, and there are some people to this day who are like, Jar Jar's my guy. So you know what? It is what it is.
I interview people all the time on my other show, and often they'll talk about Star Wars, and a lot of them are, of the age where Phantom Menace was their jam, right from the beginning, right? So it was for me, it was Star Wars. For you, it was probably Empire Strikes Back, right?
I mean, it was I was Star Wars, but I was a little kid.
Yeah. No. Yeah, it's funny because I don't know if you've ever seen. There's a picture. I think probably told you this before, but there's a still in the scene where the Millennium Falcon is sitting on the deck in the Death Star, and there's all the troopers lined up, right? It's a famous still from the stills of back then they used to have.
Yeah, they used to be in the lobbies.
See these images.
Yeah, they used to have those lobby cards, right?
And to me, that sold me to see that movie, just that picture, because I saw it in what was it, Star Week magazine? What was the magazine they used to have in the theaters?
I remember that one. Yeah.
Well, because I used to see sci-fi movies, and everybody hated sci-fi movies back then because they were dry and boring. And I've told you before, right? Watch Journey to the Far Side of the Sun if you don't want to if you want to know what I mean. But it's a great movie, but it's super dry and slow, right?
Well, anyway. Solaris, and there's a lot of movies from that era that were not doing what the people at ILM ended up doing, right?
Yeah, well, we're going to come back to this in my pick when we get to the watch list, because I've got a really interesting video that I watched the other day, which is kind of cool. But speaking of interesting, Mike Van Ochmans, or as his website says, MVVO. Mike Van Ochmans, as you may or may not know, is our voiceover guy on this show, and he has relaunched his, I guess, I don't know, putting a shingle out there in terms of voiceover work. So yeah, there's a link to to Mike's voiceover work in commercials and narration. So if you're ever looking for a voiceover guy, we cannot recommend him highly enough.
We love you, Mike. You're doing great work with us. We highly recommend.
Yeah, so if you're ever looking for a voiceover dude for a podcast or audiobook or whatever you have, definitely check out Mike's work. And of course, you've heard him introducing the show and closing us out on both this show and on More Than Just Code. So cool. Check it out.
I want to have Mike's voice when I grow up. I want to have Mike's voice.
I'll tell him you said that. All right. Well, this brings us to the main part of the show where we're going to talk about Star Trek Discovery. We're going to talk about the latest episode of Star Trek Discovery. Oh, wait a minute.
Which latest episode, Tim? Which one?
I'm confused now. We're going to talk about Season 5, Episode 6, Whistlespeak. However, there was a bit of a snafu. I got a message on my Apple device saying that Thursday is when the episodes usually come out, but it was Wednesday in the afternoon, and my phone gave me an alert saying the next episode of Star Trek is available on Paramount Plus, and I went, that's strange, and I just sort of parked that idea for a moment, and when I had like an hour to kill yesterday, I fired up Paramount Plus and I watched the episode, and in the preview there was a scene where they were looking at runes and sort of trying to decipher them. And then when they showed the puzzle thing, the MacGuffin for this week's episode, it looked almost complete. And I went, that doesn't look right, because, I'm trying to remember where we were last week, and I'm like, where is this scene coming from? And did I miss something? Should I go back? And I went back and looked at the other episodes to see if it had any kind of clue. And then it dawned on me when I was chatting with Jonathan about it, that it wasn't actually Season 5, Episode 6. It was Season 5, Episode 7 that came out a full 24 hours before it should have, right? I watched it, and I think you watched it too, Jonathan, right?
I did. I watched it last night. Yeah, it was funny because you and I were going back and forth on text, and then I started taking some screenshots, because not only did Paramount Plus put up the episode, but it actually had next week's release date. Like, it was actually dated to drop next week. And there was no episode 6. It just went from 5 to 7. So I sat down last night and watched it as well, knowing that this is clearly what they had done, was just press the wrong button and put up the wrong episode. And then sometime this morning, they clearly recognized there was something wrong here and switched it so that you could now watch episode 6, but now you can't watch episode 7. So Tim and I got bonus episodes this week, but we're not going to do any spoilers.
Right. I'm going to say that I went back just before I watched today's episode. I went back I opened up the app, and it was still on the Star Trek Discovery page, and I could see episode 7. And so for fun, I clicked on it, and of course it was still playing. So I could have rewound it and watched it again, but when I went back one level up into the menu to refresh it and brought it back down again, it was gone. So
yeah.
But yeah, it was an interesting episode, and yeah, we're really looking forward to talking about it.
Yeah, it was a really good episode. Some stuff happens. We're not going to talk about that stuff, but
there's some pew pew, and there's some Easter eggy stuff, and yeah.
But yeah, it was a very strange snafu. I tried checking around social media. I tried checking in with some of my blog stuff. So I don't know if this was localized or what the issue was. Obviously, Tim and I don't live too far apart, so maybe they pushed the button just for a certain area. I truly don't know. I haven't seen anybody make any other reference to it. But
really,
if you want to check with us, we can tell you what happened. You can confirm it next week.
Yep.
I feel like we should put some money down on what happens next week.
Yeah, we should probably place some bets on what's going to happen next week, right?
Yeah. It's like
kind of like seeing into the future.
As I jokingly put into my notes, the time bug clearly got a hold of us at some point. Somebody put a time bug into the Spockcast computers, and we ended up with
I think you and I went through a wormhole and got an advanced look.
Yeah,
right?
really. But
all right, let's talk about Whistlespeak.
Yeah.
Yes. Today is Whistlespeak. let's talk about that.
All right. Well, I'll start with my pitch because it was right there, which is Prime Directive? We don't need no stinking Prime Directive.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
Mine is, this is a completely unique take for a Star Trek episode, I thought. A primitive society believes that they need to perform a sacrifice to appease an ancient technology left by benevolent aliens.
Yeah. Wow, that's new stuff.
Wait. That's totally new theory, right? New. I think half the episodes in the original series were based on that plot device, right?
Yeah.
I went a snarkier route. I went Space Walls, the search for more budget. Where spoilers, there wasn't really like a pew pew pew. I really stretched on the pew 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 for this one, but it's one of those episodes where they can. I mean, it's not like they didn't have special effects. Just to be really clear,
well, there was pew 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 in the recap.
Yeah. But he was like, hey, get some medieval costumes, throw some loaf on their face, and go on. This is like a really inexpensive one for presumably the next episode that you all watch that does have the big pew pew pews. Just 45 minutes of pew pew pew.
Yeah, there's some much better pew 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 in next week's episode, but yeah, I agree, Jaime. This felt like let's keep our powder dry for a week, and we'll go up to the woods north of Toronto and make an episode.
But it's funny though that you say that because there was a scene in the episode that you and I saw, Jonathan, where Burnham is walking down a hallway, and it like the budget for that hallway must have been like half the budget for this entire show. Do you remember that scene?
I do. Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's something out of Doctor Who almost, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, so that's where all the money went this season, I guess.
Yeah.
We'll find out. You'll find out next week.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, as far as pew 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 goes for this one, I put the thirst race. I called it the Hunger Games. They, as part of this whole episode is, they have to complete this trial, and so Tilly and Burnham are trying to go on a hike, and the twist is that they don't know that they have to basically like eat a bag of saltine crackers before they go on this hike, and they're not allowed to drink anything, and so. Yeah, it wasn't exactly pew pew. It was mildly dramatic, like, oh, my lips are parched. Like it was, it was pretty weak pew pew. Yeah. But I guess that's about as close to conflict as we came this week. They had
chapped lips too. They had chapped lips.
They did have chapped lips, yeah.
But it's funny because I'm sure my sister Indira, who's probably listening to this show, will remember we had those salad bowls in the 70s.
Yeah, everybody did. Yeah.
I forget what kind of wood they were made out of, but yeah. All right. The thirst race.
Yep.
Yes, the Hunger Games.
On the Easter egg side, they only make one reference to this in this episode, and then they reference it more in the subsequent episode. But the USS Lockerer is, they say at the beginning of the episode, is the ship that's pursuing Maul and Locke while this episode transpires. And then at the end of this episode, they say that they've located them. The name caught my ear. It rang a bell, so I looked it up, and of course the USS Lockerer is named after J.P. Lockerer, who was a cinematographer and was a camera operator on Discovery, and he died in 2022. So that's a nice little nod inside to I hope to do something worthy of having a starship named after me at some point.
Right.
The USS JPK. Yeah. I'll even take ISS. I'm fine, whatever.
Mm-hmm. All right.
And I think you named the ultimate Easter egg, Tim, which is this is the most Star Trek ever Star Trek.
Yeah, it's like they're rolling out every trope. In fact, I was going to talk about the special appearance that is in next week's episode, which is like, because we talked about that. Let's get everybody that used to be on the show back in for like a cameo or a bit, because there's one character that comes in from like I think the third season.
Yep.
Comes, or I guess fourth season, I guess, right? Because did she come forward with them in time?
Yeah.
I can't remember. Anyway.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Again, you'll have to wait till next week. No spoilers.
No spoilers. Hey, stop spoiling things. But yeah, no, it is kind of a greatest hits season at times. It does feel like they're kind of rolling things out, but it's a real slowdown because like last week was, as you mentioned, Jaime, was kind of pew pew pewy in the the Enterprise and the wormhole and the conflict and Locke. This week kind of really slowed it down again, and again, spoilers, they'll ramp it back up next week. But yeah, it definitely felt like this one was a lot sort of slower paced. And sort of B plot of this one is, there's two, I guess. One is they're trying to figure out the how to get to this puzzle piece, and then they figure it out. And then there's this whole sort of backstory. Now, the overarching theme of this episode is another one, which is also, it's fertile Trek territory, which is faith, right? So we have simultaneously Hugh Culber is dealing with the after effects of having had that Trill take over his body. And we also have the people on the planet who are, devout and believe that they need to, sacrifice themselves to the gods in order to get, rain to fall on their planet to keep them alive.
And that's how it works, right? That's how weather works, right? Yeah.
But I mean, this is something that's been well explored in Star Trek over the years, is, these crisis of faith moments, and particularly in this episode where we see, the Prime Directive get thrown once again out the window. Now, I think this is the strongest case, and I'll make this argument. I think this is one of the strongest cases they have for the Prime Directive being violated, in that this is under the sort of red notice. We have to find this thing or all hell breaks loose. It could cost us, this planet and infinite other lives and planets. I think if you're going to break the Prime Directive, I mean, you can make the case that Burnham really was kind of do it to save Tilly, but really it was about, we have to succeed on this mission. We have to figure out how to get the next clue, because we have to complete this, because if the Breen get a hold of it or whatever else, then we're really screwed. So I would say, as far as the decision to scrap the Prime Directive and to appear before these people and show them their technology and explain to them what's going on here, it's probably about as good as it gets. But it
was also to avoid the paperwork, because she said there's more paperwork if
she dies.
Dies, and if
it does tie into one of my big questions for this episode, which is, is it okay to crush people's faith in order to save their lives? Right.
Well, before we get to that, though, I also want to point out there is another trope where a member of the crew mistakenly does something that ends up with them having to be put to death.
Yeah. It's the
Wesley Crusher
paradox.
Walking on the grass. Yeah. Walking across the lawn, exactly.
All right, we're talking out, and we need Jaime's thoughts here. All right,
and wait, one more thing. Yeah, just one question though. So, but what the whole idea of the Makin It Rain thing, wasn't that what the technology was about? Is that why that they had that green area? Because
because they fixed it, right?
Linoleal or whatever. Is it the Neelix people, the linoleums or whatever they called them?
Denobulin towers. I put that as an Easter egg for the Dr. Phlox as a connection there.
Yep.
That
Phlox,
was his people.
Right? Yes, right. But it was but the towers make it rain in that area, right?
Yeah. The idea is that the tower, essentially, by revealing themselves, they end up being able to fix the tower. Being able to fix the tower, they actually bring the rain, which is actually what they were trying to do by doing all the sacrifices. So
sure,
it's kind of one of those, one of those deals. But I mean, it's like, does it seem okay? Jaime, what do you think? Does this seem okay? Are you allowed to do this? Does it mean you're playing God?
Yeah, I'm very curious on the exact timing of when the Denobulins got there, because I think it changes some of the aspect. Like, we have seen like Prime Directive stuff of like, hey, you got to let these entire people die because they're pre-warp capable. Therefore, there's no way that we can interfere with their natural outcome. The Denobulins, though, from what I recall in Enterprise, it's pre-Federation, and Dr. Phlox clearly had a very different viewpoint on how interstellar relations should work. And so I don't know exactly, and maybe I missed it in the episode, like, when did the Denobulins go and do this? Is this as a Federation member, or is this pre-Federation? Because that might make a big difference. Because it seemed like a huge Prime Directive violation to begin with. And so you're
it makes it sound like
compounding it by being there.
Yeah. They made it sound like this was the scientist group, the same scientist group that was working together. So it was after the events in the TNG episode with the progenitors and their technology, which means, the Nanobians would have been part of the Federation.
Yeah, okay. In that case, I think the violation has already happened. They generally try not to make it worse, but the outcome of the Red Directive, I think, was overriding. So I'm actually kind of surprised that Rayner wasn't like, Red Directive, move on, just jump in there, Michael.
You would have thought he'd bring it
totally
down, right?
Too many words. Yeah.
Like he's definitely the guy who's like, the ends justify the means. So I'm kind of surprised somebody else wasn't like, are you sure we should? Whatever, Red Directive, just move on. You got to murder that child, to murder that child. Here's another thing. Like the other question I had in line with your all's talking about the trickiest Trek sort of story was like, how many times in Star Trek is the major system powered by essentially throwing somebody into a volcano? We saw this on Star Trek Strange New Worlds. It's not like the first time. I don't know, is it more than 10 times where you got to sacrifice somebody to keep the major system running?
Didn't Lower Decks do that too? I'm sure they did a spoof on that.
Yeah, they did the weird one where it's like, also this one has like an AI, overgod, and they're secretly eating people or whatever it was that was happening.
Yeah, the computer system hidden behind the big rock. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the isolinear chips. That was the Easter egg we missed.
Oh, yes, the isolinear chips.
Because we all use isolinear chips every day in our computing, don't we?
Yeah. Can't live without those.
They were swapping out the 8-track, players kind of thing by their equivalent in, the Discovery's future time frame.
It's so funny, though, because they're really offhanded about this, too. Now, maybe isolinear chips lasted from, the 23rd century into the 31st century, where we are now in this show. But when Burnham opens up this, hidden compartment and starts, readjusting the power and moving things around, and Adira's directing Burnham how to do this stuff, I couldn't help but think this would be like telling a, Gen Z kid how to use an abacus or something. It feels they'd be like, I do what now?
What, I don't just look at it and wink? Yeah. It's
like a baby's toy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, it's like, they're like, Spock had isolator chips. He had those little floppy disks all the time he'd load into the machine, right? So.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just love the fact that it doesn't matter what the computer system is. If just by moving a few things around, you can reboot the system without rebooting the system and all that stuff. It's just, yeah.
Well, and they have...
How would you possibly know?
In the last couple of seasons, since they went to the 31st century, we see this every week. We see the Discovery's got all this new technology. They've got, all these cool things that they can do now. Could she not have just sprinkled some magic dust on this thing and turned it into 31st century
programmable
tech?
Matter or whatever?
Yeah. I don't know. It just.
I love the brand new contact lens tricorders that they have.
That was cool. I must admit, I did really dig those. Although, again, not such the great item to bring on an away mission where you're supposed to be undercover, where they're like, well, we've put on our special makeup, we're in our, native clothing and stuff like that. Oh, yeah, but our eyes glow like flashlights every few minutes when we're trying to look at something.
Yeah. And I thought that they said they couldn't, I thought they were going to jump in a shuttle and drive down, right? So
that would have been too easy.
Well, they did, because they were having trouble with the transporter, and then they figured they just moved some isolinear chips around and it worked or something.
Apparently.
Yeah, there was something where the tower was, falling into disrepair, and its power output was doing something weird that interfered with the transporter. So turning it off and on again seemed to right the ship, so to speak, and make it possible to beam through.
Well, also the Chernobyl moment where she's walking towards the radiation to get to the panel.
Yeah.
Just follow the glowing plants.
Yeah.
You'll be fine.
Yeah.
Just don't stay there very long.
What could go wrong?
Just hold your breath while you're there.
As they ate the, I don't know, it was like sawdust and crackers and peanut butter and alum hill or whatever it was that made them super thirsty. I did wonder at the time, I'm like, is this Michael figuring out something critical, or is she just punking out and be like, "Oh yeah, you keep running. I'm gonna eat. I'm gonna drink this water, not be thirsty, and see if this thing works out or not."
Right. You keep going.
I love that moment where they're like, they're standing in line and all of a sudden they start passing this stuff out. Couldn't you just palm that? Wouldn't you just palm that? Like,
yeah, pretty much.
Boy, that's good. Oh, I'm so parched. Darn. Oh,
what part of the cow was this? Yeah, exactly.
You just run past everybody else because you're fully hydrated. You're just running backwards and high stepping your way over there, just taunting them. Like, man, are you not in good shape? Because
like
the gods don't favor you.
The end zone. What do you just like? Yeah,
exactly.
This, I don't know. I found this one interesting. So I want to throw a quote out that really kind of stuck with me from the quotes from this one. So it's the moment after Obaz, who's the sort of leader or the religious leader, at least of this group, is talking to Burnham. Burnham's revealed that she's from space. She's shown them technology. They beam down Hugh. They're trying to save their child, who uses gender-neutral pronouns, which I also like that they included that in this episode. And he says, does all this mean, are there no gods? What is there? And again, like, this guy just had this crippling moment where he's like, I didn't like the fact that our people were like sacrificing themselves, but this is what we do. And now he's got to go back down there. And Burnham's like, hey, we can show you how to keep this thing running so that you're not all going to die. Because if you don't, you're all going to die. And so you can obviously morally say they've done the right thing, but this guy's faith is destroyed. And beyond that, he's going to go back to his village and they're going to be like, didn't your child win this race? Shouldn't they be dead? And he's going to be like, no, there were these space aliens. And they're going to be like, okay, well, like, let's get the bonfire going. This guy's going, like, heretic. Like, I don't know. It all felt really complicated to me. I'm trying to remember. I know there was an episode of Star Trek at one point where, somebody tried to turn their back on their faith in an episode of Star Trek, and in the end, like, couldn't hack it and killed themselves. I swear that's a plot line from an episode in the past.
Well, there was the one where they go to the planet where with Riker, and the people have no gender.
Right.
They have like a single gender, and the one person doesn't want to. She does something or they do something that means that they go on trial, and he defends them.
Right.
Like he breaks, like, he even goes against Picard's rules and goes and defends her. And in the end, she loses and they lose and get killed anyway. Right.
Yeah. It's, I don't know. It is a really interesting one. Like, these are obviously, this is what Trek is great. Trek does these great moral dilemmas and ethical dilemmas and, what is right. But I don't know. This was a little gray for me.
I thought at one point Burnham says, maybe the gods sent me to help you.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, so...
Well, and that she basically, that's what she says, is like, just because I'm here and just because we did this in the past, and the Nobilians did this in the past, doesn't mean you don't have gods. It just means that, or it doesn't mean there isn't gods or God. It's just that this part isn't that. But it's still, like, again, it's like being like coming... to now and being like, okay, so listen, the Bible thing or the Quran or the Torah, that's none of that. But actually, I don't know. It just feels like it's a pretty slippery slope. And I want the epilogue to this episode to be like him coming back to the village going, you guys aren't going to believe this, Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is what the Lower Decks crew, the Cerritos, they always go in and do the day 2 cleanup, right?
That's a second contact, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
A couple more quotes that I liked. Kovic is from the very beginning of the episode. Very, a quick step in there where he's got a legal pad. Which is even funnier because, of course, it's David Cronenberg. And he rips off the piece of paper and hands it to her and says, I know it's eccentric of me, but I do love the feel of paper. And this is an antique. This is a 21st century legal pad. I'm like, that is a strange affectation to have for a character to be like, I love the feel of paper.
Yeah, but by the same token, like how many times do people these days use paper? They just don't, right?
Well, it's becoming
they take a note on their phone or whatever.
Yeah.
But like modern paper is not the right equivalent. This is like grabbing some papyrus out of like the Smithsonian and like using it for solving the mystery of the day.
I stole it from a museum. Exactly.
Yeah.
They're going to count each sheet when I bring it back, right?
Yeah. And the other quote that I liked was when Tilly was trying to make a play on words, because Burnham's getting all excited about xenoanthropology, and she says, "You can take the xeno out of the anthropologist, but you can't take the anthropologist." No, I lost it. Like, I wanted to know where she was going with it. She's like, "Nope, it's not there." I'm like, I wonder if that was a writer who was like, "No, that's not going to work." But Tilla would say that.
Yeah.
I have one more big question, unless you guys have some more quotes.
I just had one real quote that I liked, the body in motion remains in motion mantra, to like keep going and not stop, from Tilly when they were, struggling. And then the one, again, because I went with Space Walls, the search for more budget. Part of the reason I came up with that is when they were suffocating in the vacuum in the tower, I think a quote that should have been in there was air. Just like Spaceballs.
But from a continuity point of view, I was thinking to myself, like, how come the fires are still burning?
Well, and wouldn't your first move be to blow the fires out? Like, they're sucking all the air out.
Well, yeah, but by the same token, though, if there's no oxygen in the room, what's keeping the fires burning, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, didn't make a lot of sense. My other big question was tied to the little epilogue where we see Culber go back to reconnect with Book, and the two of them sit down, and he says, "Here, I brought you this dish that was my grandmother's recipe." So Culber brings this, Book sits down, they both dig in. Now, Jaime, I didn't catch the name of the dish. It was in Spanish. I don't know if you know it any better than we do, but it looked really good. But it made me think to myself, I'm very curious. So one thing we know about Book is that he's an empath, and particularly from the earlier seasons, we know that he's empathically connected with animals, which would make him to be the perfect candidate to be either a vegetarian or a vegan, right? Because chances are, if you are listening to the animals, and again, we saw him do this work to save these, animals earlier in season 3, you'd think he probably wouldn't be someone who's like, let's kill that thing and eat it. But what are the ethics of vegetarians and vegans in a world where everything is replicated, where food is replicated? Because that dish, I did recognize the word pollo because you have a pet named Pollo. He's eating a chicken dish. Would he maybe not? Like, are you really eating chicken if you're eating replicated chicken? You're
eating programmable matter?
I tripped over that one. It kind of stopped me in my tracks because I was like, there's no way Book wouldn't be a vegetarian. They've established so much about how he's connected with animals. There's no way he wouldn't be a vegetarian. But then, are you violating the sanctity of your vegetarianism or veganism if you eat replicated meat?
I guess it depends on how they got the schematics or design into the replicator is what I guess somebody might ask. Like, were they able to, scan and not harm the animal, or did they have to kill an animal and then put it through a process to get the original design for that? I think you're quite clear that, like, look, just like the Admiral put in like season 2, like, this apple used to be my poop. We just like recycle the matter. Like, I think from that point it doesn't matter, but you follow the chain of like, well, how did they even get to this point? I don't think there's a distance factor for the vegan or vegetarian ethics. So I would be sort of picking and poking at like, well, how did they get the design of it? Like, but was it ethically sourced in some way? Non-invasive.
And even beyond that, like, you'd think that even if it was replicated, that you might be kind of grossed out at the concept that even as a replicated matter, it was replicated animal flesh. But then I also know vegetarians and vegans who eat, soy protein that's formed to look like chicken nuggets and stuff like that. So I guess that's mood, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
It stopped me in my tracks. I was just a little bit like, hey, wait a minute. How does vegetarianism, veganism work in a world where you're not really eating that? Because we might find ourselves in that world over the next, couple hundred years where we're not eating as much real meat if you can synthesize meat, right? Like, is lab-grown meat?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it doesn't have eyes and the other part, right?
It doesn't taste as good as if it didn't die screaming?
Yeah, I guess.
Now, that's a very Klingon approach to things.
Yeah.
Well, the Klingons don't kill the food; they just eat it.
That's true. They don't have to kill it first. Although I'm pretty sure that the consumption of the gach probably kills the gach.
Yeah. I would think. Well, that's the whole theory behind it, right? Like, do you chew it or do you just swallow it?
I don't know. When you see them eat it in the show, they like usually tip their necks all the way back and just sort of drop them into their mouths. So hard to say if that's just kind of sliding down. I mean, kind of seems like it would defeat the purpose if you're not chewing on the gach. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. Right. Cool.
Jonathan, you'd asked. So I was familiar with the name mofongo for the dish. According to the Googles, it is a traditional Puerto Rican dish of mashed green plantains with garlic, salt, and olive oil, often served with broth and meat or seafood. Yeah.
I mean, it looked good, and what you just described sounds good to me, but I'm also not vegan or vegetarian, so...
Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, Jaime, can't recommend next week's episode enough. It's very...
Wait till you see the part with the and the thing
with and when it goes like kaboom, and you're just like, wow.
Yeah.
So what are you guys going to do next week? Are you going to do a rewatch and see if you catch anything, the second time that you didn't quite get? Or are you just going to, did you take notes and you're just going to coast into next week? Like you're already ahead of the homework?
I already took all my notes and I had already done like a rundown of it. But I will have to tweak a few things because part of it was like, if they don't fix this, what do I do? So I started making notes about like, well, if they do this, then I'll use this part. And if they bring it back sooner, then they'll do this. I'm like, because when I was doing my notes, I didn't know what was going to happen to all this. So
yeah. But it's funny though, if you think about it though, like in terms of like the season arc and all that kind of stuff, this episode today that they showed today, they could have skipped.
I mean, they needed to find the next clue, but they could have just been like, we found the next clue.
But they didn't really find the next clue. They just found what the last clue meant.
Well, no,
the number 5.
They did find, because they said they found the piece, because you see them put the piece in.
Yeah, at the very. I'm waiting for someone to come up with a Thingiverse to make a model so I can print it out.
Yeah, and then they say they say, and it had a piece of metal in it that had Betazoid writing on it, and we know from the list.
Oh yes, we can't talk about that.
No,
spoilers.
But we know from the beginning of this episode, for episode 6,
oh, that's true.
that Kovic gives them a list and has 2 names left on it. One of them was a Denobulan, and one of them was a Betazoid as the last 2 scientists. Right. So we know the Denobulan was from this episode, and we know that they talk about the Betazoid in the next one. But yeah,
and she did mention the card at the end of this episode. But they kind of like phoned in the Tower 5 piece, right? Because they were in Tower 3.
Yeah,
in this
I guess
episode.
At some point they just like went in there, but wearing like dust-proof suits or something.
Like as Jaime would say, the hands were waving, right? The hand wavy.
Yeah.
Oh, and we went to Tower 5, and did they have to do another, thirst race to get to the 5? And and was there another clan of people around there?
I couldn't help but think, once they sort of spoiled the broth and they were like, hey, by the way, we're space aliens and we've come to fix this tech and you guys are going to be okay. Couldn't they have fixed the other 4 towers?
Yeah. I don't know.
Wouldn't that have been a move? Like, hey, instead of you guys all living in this one circle on your planet and like, clearly it's hazardous where they are, where like the dust is blowing in.
You mean all the other, there were other towers around the planet and they're all brown and dry because
they show the planet from above and they show it like a number of times and they're like, this one little zone that is protected by this one tower is good. And they're like, but someday it's going to break down. Like, maybe fix the other 4 towers?
Yeah.
Like it's not like you'd be like, spoilers, we're aliens.
While you're there, reboot the tower, exactly.
Like, wouldn't that be like, that'd be my first request? Like, okay, if you guys are actually God and you guys did this, could you maybe like do some godding on that stuff and fix it for us so that we don't have to live in this one circle?
But the whole thing they were talking about the dust, when the woman at the very beginning talks about doing the dusting, was she like in the dry area that was outside the green ring?
I don't know. She says she was like an orchard area, but I don't know if that was supposed to be like, near the outer edge or why that's there. But she makes it sound like that for sure.
Yeah, true.
Like I say, my move would be like, hey, please maybe fix this.
Maybe that's what the lower decks crew are going to do in the
second contact,
right? Yeah, and third contact. Go over there and fix stuff and undo the damage that Burnham did. Transport them all to a ship and then take them to another planet without letting them know that they're actually on a ship, right?
That's it. That's right.
That would be a good plot vehicle. What do you think?
I think you're onto something.
Can we have an arc episode?
Well, wasn't that the whole? That was was it Insurrection?
That's right.
Insurrection too. But it was also an episode of Star Trek where they with Riker and those gang. The Next Generation.
Oh, that's right. They have to go in like, we'll go hide in the caves, and then they like move the caves, and
they transport the caves into the holodeck or something.
Yeah.
That was Worf's brother that tinkered with that, right? And they had to mess with it, or was that yet another one? Okay.
Yeah. Was it like Paul Sorvino, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Yep. But then, Insurrection, the whole plot of Insurrection is that they live on that like planet of immortality, and then they're basically going to like transport all the people out into like the artificial village and get them off the planet so that all the people with the stretchy skin can live there, right?
Wait, Paul Sorvino is Worf's brother?
Yeah. Well, not anymore. He's dead, but yes.
He was.
O'Reilly! Check engine light on? Take the guesswork out of your check engine light with O'Reilly Veriscan. It's free and provides a report with solutions based on over 650 million vehicle scans verified by ASE-certified master technicians. And if you need help, we can recommend a shop for you. Ask for O'Reilly Veriscan today.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Should we pour one out for the Bad Batch?
Yes, let's do that.
All right. Talk about an awesome show.
Yeah,
it's funny because it kind of took a while to grow on me, I think, but you really got used to those cats.
Yeah, we were talking about last week, and we were a little worried that they were going to get into Hold My Beer territory, so they did a 50-minute finale. So obviously longer. Last week's episode was a really short one; it was only like 22 minutes or something like that. So clearly they were kind of holding their powder for the finale. And so we got one that was, sort of 2.5 times longer than a normal episode. So that was good. I'm still not sure that I got everything out of the finale that I would have liked, but I think overall it was still satisfying. I don't think...
Well, you got the Zillo Beast for one. Come on.
We got the Zillo Beast, and we got, Omega doing cool Omega, stuff. We got the Bad Batch, together, there looked like there were going to be some hero ball stuff in there where they, I'll do this one on myself and I'm going to take one for the team, but no, they kind of hold it together. But this whole season had a really strong arch for Crosshair where, he was, the whole series really, like he goes from like, good soldiers follow orders to I'm not sure I trust the orders to I'm not going to do this anymore to I'm a prisoner to I'm traumatized. This whole season where like he's got the tremors and he's got PTSD, like an amazing story arc for a cartoon. Like this is good stuff. And in this episode, we see, his final fate is that he gets his shooting hand chopped off.
Right. Yeah.
In a bit of a weird, like off-screen, non-dramatic moment. They're basically just like, "Hey, he's knocked out. Let's chop off his hand." Like that was weird. And then they didn't really.
No, they chopped the guy with the guy with the sword chopped it off. They just didn't show it.
But that's what I mean. But they didn't really like. It wasn't like it was like heroically. He was like diving in the way, and the sword like it just they literally like knocked him out, and then they chopped his hand off.
Stepped on him. Yeah.
But I just don't know that I don't feel like I got as much closure and catharsis. I guess it is that he makes the long distance shot at the end. That's supposed to be like, well, I'm fine now because I'm using the other hand. I don't know. His was the only arc that I didn't find as ultimately satisfying because they had really built up this whole like, he's still trying. Even in this episode when it started, he was still trembling. He's still having tough PTSD and stuff, and yet it didn't quite land the way that I hoped it did. What did you take away from all this?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if he I don't think he was. I think he was conscious when they cut his hand cut off. What you saw at the end was where they were sort of sealing it up, right?
Yeah.
Because I think Hunter was being zapped by somebody with that big staff thing with the it was being electrocuted or whatever, or tasered or whatever. And he was down on the ground and he was reaching for his gun, and the I don't know, the death what do you call those trooper?
No, yeah,
guy stood on his hand and said, you should never never lose your shooting hand. And then it's the Quentin Tarantino style, chops it off. You don't hear the scream, you don't see it. So it happens off camera, right?
Yeah.
Because I wondered about that too, because when they showed him later on, they were kind of lasering it or whatever, sealing it up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so why doesn't he get the same thing? Who's the dude with the R2D2 probe that he can stick into
Echo,
the ports, right?
Echo.
Yeah. By the way, I started watching Succession, and as one point they're talking about one of the characters has a reference to a situation in business where things could potentially go wrong, and he says, "Remember, put a grate over the port, the Death Star port." Anyway, but yeah, so that was good, and I actually liked the way they ended Omega, because Omega's always been that weird. What is it about Omega that makes her so special? First of all, she's a clone. She's from the same material as the rest of them, but she's tiny, right? And she's female, or identifies as female, it seems to be, right? Mm-hmm. And then you see her at the end of it with Hunter in the sort of closing section where, we fade to black, and then it's 10 years later,
the
or whatever,
epilogue,
and she's going off on her own, and she's now an adult, right? Because she says to him, "I'm an adult now, and I'm going to go off and
join the rebellion." Yeah.
And I mean, the big question for me coming out of this would be, and I said it in Slack. I was chatting with Dave on our Slack channel again. That so does she go off and now become a Jedi? And do we have clone Jedis now, right? Because she obviously has. We're talking about midichlorians. I never really call it out that, but the M count has to be midichlorians, right? Because that's what we needed, what Palpatine needed for his resurrection plan, which he starts talking. He talks to Anakin Skywalker about it in, I think it was Clone Wars, or maybe it was the one where he's grooming him, right? To be Darth Vader, because he talks about that one Jedi, or that one Sith Lord who figured out the immortality, right?
Yep. Darth Plagueis the Wise.
Him. And then so the question is, she's obviously got a high M count, which makes her potentially, even though she's too old to be trained as a Jedi, according to Qui-Gon Jinn, or what's Samuel Jackson's character?
Oh, Mace Windu.
Mace Windu, he's always Jake Lloyd is too old to be trained as a Jedi. But you got to get them when they're young before they, learn how to,
like things,
walk or whatever. But yeah. So I kind of wonder, now, are we going to see her come in the next series with Ahsoka and kind of and who's going to play her in the live versions, right? So
yeah, what famous New Zealander who's blonde can we hire to play that role? I want to know what you thought of this.
Maybe one that used to play Barbie. I don't know.
Yeah. I want to know what you thought of all this, because this was a kind of a lot all wrapped up in one last episode.
Yeah, it's kind of weird to call it the last episode. I feel like I was vindicated here. I said, either it's extreme hold my beer moment in the 20 to 30 minute final episode, or they're just gonna have it be 2, and so I wasn't quite right, but it effectively was 2. I don't know if there's royalty reasons or something, but come on, guys, you can't have every episode be the same length and then the last one be
double,
suspiciously double. You want to make it triple? All right, you kind of made a mini movie. I got you. You make it 2. I'm like, that's a little weird. That feels like. Well,
where could they cut this one? I guess that's the question too, because Dave raised that same point. It could have been 2 episodes, but where would you put the break?
Yeah, it would have ultimately. It would have been hard on the pacing, because this episode definitely had a pace to it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, actually, I just want to read something Dave said. It was pretty interesting about the 2 arcs, the way that the Bad Batch are trying to get in and she's trying to get out at the same time, right?
Yeah. It was very
They had
funny.
the
I thought the
parallels.
lines about, as they let the Zillow Beast, of course, Omega and the youngsters all let the Zillow Beast out, and then it's trashing its way up, and they're like, "Wow, who did this?" And they're like, "Well, it was clearly Omega's work." The batch recognized their own, right?
Yeah. Well, and she's been well trained. I mean, that's what they have been doing with her over the last 3 seasons, right? It was training her to be a badass, right?
Yeah. It was kind of strange, though, that like this whole season was about, Hemlock and Project Necromancer, and it seemed like they were sort of laying the foundations for a lot of the stuff we'd seen in Mandalorian, and obviously culminating in Rise of Skywalker, where the Emperor returns, and there's the whole cloning thing, and it all sort of tied together. But it was kind of weird that the culmination of this final battle is that they kill Hemlock and destroy Nalisay, of course, destroys the records, and Ambro Rempart, who of course was just the biggest scumbucket. I'm like, whose idea was it to let Rempart out of his cage? Like, what? Go backwards. Like, I mean, I get, obviously the whole point is that Nalisay has her final revenge for the Kaminoans, but like, come on. That was like, who in there was like, all right, let's let everybody free. You guys are all clones. We're cool, right? Yeah, we're clones. We're cool. What about Rempart? Nah, he's fine. He's tried to turn his back on us like 15 times, but he's fine.
Yeah, let him out. What was his backstory though? Like before, like was he in the series?
Yeah,
before?
Rempart was the sort of the overarching bad guy from season 1. He was the guy who was the Imperial commander on Camino. So,
okay, right.
Yeah. So, and then he had gotten obviously busted down for Omega getting away, and all that stuff that happened in the end of season 1 and into season 2.
Well, he was in jail, or he was in prison.
He was on a prison planet. Yeah. So, yep. Yeah. But it was. Like I say, it wasn't a perfect finale, but it was certainly a damn good one. And I agree with you, Tim. I think I wasn't sure. I didn't love the Bad Batch when they were first introduced in Clone Wars. It just seemed a little bit, just sort of maybe too convenient. Like, wow, what if we took our clones, but they were just a little different? But I really did come to love this group of people. And I kind of really do hope that not only does Omega show up at some point in this whole sort of Mandalorian Ahsoka universe at some point, but even there is a little hint there. They leave the door open where Hunter says, if you ever need us, we're only ever a call away. I don't know if you could do the Bad Batch in live action, but I wouldn't say no if they did.
Right. Yeah, no, yeah, I think these characters should show up, like kind of like Rex showed up in this one, coming over from Rebels, right?
Yeah,
and from the other stuff, but the Clone Wars, but I don't know. I think it leads to having them, be something in the future, right? So
yeah. I really do wonder what else they're going to do from an animation standpoint now, because, there was a gap between the end of Clone Wars and then into Rebels and then the return of Clone Wars and then spinning into the Bad Batch. We do have these Tales of the Jedi and Tales of the Empire.
Well, this is Dave Filoni's work again, so he's obviously got something. I would think he's got something planned.
Yeah, I hope that there's another cartoon series coming somewhere in there. I don't know what it'll focus on, but, I must admit I haven't watched Star Wars Resistance, which was another sort of spin-off. That's a spin-off of Force Awakens, obviously, but I hope they do more of this animated version of Star Wars. I like it. I really like it.
Well, this style was different too for this one compared to Rebels or wasn't it? Like it was a different animation style as well, right?
Yeah, they've constantly evolved the animation style throughout these things from Clone Wars forward. There's been sort of tweaking and tweaking and tweaking. I thought that the animation, some of the effects and stuff that they had done were pretty good in this one, but I think it would be a shame if they didn't keep the Star Wars animated universe going somehow.
Yeah. All right, well, let's move on to our watch list. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I'm first. So we joked about when our hiatus came up after the last series of Star Trek ended and Discovery started. It was about a gap there. We joked about starting a new Succession podcast, right? And I started watching it the other day, and I'm already 7 episodes in. It's a good enough show. It's pretty much Game of Thrones, but with modern business, right? So really interesting. I mean, at first it was a bit weird, but like by the end of the first episode, you're like, okay, what happens next? And now I'm 7 episodes in, and I'll probably spend the rest of the weekend watching the rest of it. It's really good. It's a really good series of good actors and good drama, and like the characters are just from left field. The Culkin character, Kieran Culkin, is sort of the Peter Dinklage sort of character in this one, right? I don't know if he's necessarily this, because I think what's the name of the character in Game of Thrones?
Tyrion.
That he plays. Tyrion. Yeah, he's not as central as Tyrion was to the story, but he definitely is in there for a bunch of good laughs, and it's interesting to sort of see what I mean. These people are like filthy rich in business, right? And because the dad's a media mogul, right?
Yeah.
So kind of really, really good show. But the other thing before I get to my second thing, I can do that with third, but I also watched an episode of Shogun. I watched the Richard Chamberlain Shogun series that was on, I think it was the late 70s, right? Like you even learned a little bit of Japanese if you watched that show, right? Because they teach him Japanese in the story. But this is the sort of, I don't know if it's a Disney Plus or Stars or whatever. I mean, because there's a few decapitations in the first episode, right?
Yeah, I think it's FX actually.
Yeah, so I watched the first episode, and I'm definitely going to go back for more. And again, it's one of my pet peeves is subtitles, but yeah, this is really entertainingly enough that I'll put up with that, and because I remember the story, and it's kind of a Robinson Crusoe kind of story, Count of Monte Cristo kind of tale of.
Yeah, and the culture clash and everything. Yeah, I remember the original, the miniseries that they did in the 80s.
Yeah. Was it 80s?
Yeah, Richard Chamberlain. Yeah, they did like a whole series of those.
Dr. Kildare, for those of you playing at home.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
I really liked that one, and I must admit I've had the same thing. I've been sort of circling this one for a while, but I just haven't been in the mood for anything with that much disemboweling. So.
Yeah. But my main pick here today is I gotta just hit pause here. Is Neil deGrasse Tyson, who is I think he's America's, like, I don't know what you call him, number one physicist, whatever, scientist dude.
Hey, Bill Nye takes exception to that.
Well, I don't know what his. I know that Brian Cox is a he's a what do you call it, cosmologist, right? So, and he's awesome too, in my opinion. But this is Neil deGrasse Tyson's sci-fi movie tier list, and he does it he's reviewing these not from the point of view of favorite movies of his, but from a scientific perspective in terms of what the movies. I'm trying to get to the page where he has the final chart. So each of the movies, and he drags them into a position. He's got like a scale. Oh, here I got one page here. He's got a scale where S is at the top, and then he's got an A, B, C, D, E, and F, right? And F is like the black hole, the Disney black hole kind of thing. But at the top of his list, he's got The Matrix. He's got the first Back to the Future. And I can't see what that one. I think he puts 2001 up there as well in terms of like the top movies. But it's interesting how he rates. Like he's got The Martian in there. He's got Contact. He's got Armageddon. Surprisingly, Armageddon got a better score than I would have given it. The Blob even's in there. Terminator was another movie that he really liked. But talking about like how they some of the sort of things, like one thing about Gravity, he said Gravity was really good, but he says, but when you see Sandra Bullock in 0G, how come her bangs aren't floating? Right. So that's the kind of critique that he has of this, is kind of where the science goes wrong. And like for instance, in Interstellar, he says like there's a blight on the plants and they can't figure out why the plants are dying and when they can't feed the people on Earth, but they can still build a spaceship and fly off into the future and save all of mankind. Somehow that's easier. He says, what were the biologists doing at that time? Like, why weren't they solving this problem, right? So kind of interesting review of all of our favorite sci-fi movies over the last, since 1969 to today. review. So it's cool. I think Forbidden Planet's in there too. So, but yeah, Arrival. You just name a sci-fi movie that sort of would be on the top of your list. These are the ones that he's reviewed here. So I highly recommend watching that. It's pretty entertaining. And no comments from you guys. Nothing.
Sounds good. I agree. I just rewatched The Martian recently and was once again struck by how much I enjoyed the science of it.
Yeah. He puts that one as that one scored an A, but I can't remember why it wasn't a super movie, but it was pretty up there. I agreed with a lot of his reviews, and it's funny some of the critiques that he had over it. My thing with Gravity is, knowing what I know about space travel, it happens way too fast. I mean, I think it's almost like in real time, and some of the Laura Croft-esque exploits. The one part which I thought was funny, and he commented on was, they're in 0G, and Sandra Bullock is holding on to a tether, and George Clooney's on the other end of the tether, and he's being pulled away from the ship, right? And he said all she had to do was tug, and he would start coming towards her. But that wouldn't have made a great movie, right? So
it wasn't. Oh, sorry. What did I say that out loud?
Yeah. It was some movie. There was one movie where he sort of talked about Terminator. He says Terminator. What they should have done, they should have gone back to Sarah Connor's parents and just made sure they didn't meet. He said, but then that would have been a 5-minute movie.
Well, yeah.
And he says, like, how come, he says, the one thing about the science, he says that Arnold Schwarzenegger comes in, like, back in time completely nude because no only living tissue can be transported through time, right? But he said then he shouldn't have hair because hair is technically dead, and fingernails are technically dead too. So, but there you go.
That would make for a very grim and bloody movie.
Well, grim or just like bald Arnold Schwarzenegger. I don't know.
Yeah.
Over to you, Jonathan.
Yeah, this first one really caught my eye. I don't know if you guys saw this, but Airbnb has decided to step up its game by creating these experiences. So they're doing a bunch of themed stays. And among these things there is going to be 11 experiences you can do in 2024. One of them is basically, it's in Westchester, New York, and you can basically stay at the X-Men's mansion from X-Men 97.
Right.
Another one is in New Mexico. You can go and stay in the Pixar Up House. It's a very strange choice to do this stuff, but also kind of cool. Like, it's an interesting idea. I get, obviously they want to try and people are paying for a lot of these like premium experience kind of things. You see people like, go stay and live, stay in this place and you can play with our goats, or you can go to this vineyard or whatever. The idea of making these like, you can actually stay in like these fictional places. I'm waiting for them to be like, you can stay on the wall here in Canada from Game of Thrones. Like, what are they going to build to add to these things? I thought this was a really interesting idea.
They also posted today that you can stay in Icons places, right? And I thought Airbnb Icons, what's that about? Well, you can stay in Prince's mansion.
That's part of this, right? It's the same thing. That's one of the experiences you can have, is to stay at Prince's place. It does kind of make you wonder, there's always been this sort of trend towards, famous pieces of architecture. So, Frank Lloyd Wright houses and stuff like that. Or, these sort of, sometimes it'll be like, well, this was the house that Babe Ruth was born in or whatever, and it becomes a museum. Is this the next trend? Is there going to be like a trend of like these companies or corporations buying what would have normally been like preserved historic homes and being like, you want to stay at the house that insert, Taylor Swift's childhood home, or, where's this going? It's an unusual trend, but I must admit, I don't know if you guys looked through this article, but the slideshow of the X-Men 97 stuff, but they've got it looks like it's right out of the show. There's costumes and wall art and the whole, it's kind of bonkers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's some stuff I'm like, okay, cool. So you got the almost like a locker room kind of thing. You can maybe try on some of the X-Men outfits, but I have to give them kudos for the Wolverine room. Because I looked very close and I'm like, yes, they do have a photo frame of Jean Grey and Scott Summers.
There's just going to be a bunch of people online being like doing the pose, right, from the meme.
Exactly. Yeah.
That and they have like Xavier's helmet that you can put on, and for Cerebro, and it's just it's a fun idea, but I'm also curious. They don't really mention in here like how much did this cost to do this.
Well, it says in the article that they were going to be like $100 or less.
No, I mean the setup cost, like
to build this,
like it's basically like building a giant movie set, right? Like you have to bring in like prop people and create all these things, and like it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, cool.
Next up for me, Doctor Who starts next week. I just wanted to ring the bell on that one.
When does it start, though?
Friday.
When does it start? That's what I'm trying to look.
Next Friday.
This Friday?
No, a week from tomorrow.
Oh, okay. So that's why I couldn't find it on Rogers, right?
Yes.
Because Rogers can only work 7 days at a time.
But it's on Disney Plus. It's the Disney Plus show now. It's not a space thing anymore.
Right,
it's exclusive to Disney Plus. So
cool.
That is where you will find your new Who's going forward. So if you're here in North America, that is. And
speaking of MTJC content,
yeah. And the last thing I wanted to flag was I downloaded the most popular app in the App Store, which is the Delta emulator. I don't know if either of you have gotten into this, but the Delta emulator is the first of a expected wave of emulators to pop into the App Store after the deregulation, some of the stuff that happened in court around the EU.
Oh, is that what that's about? Oh,
they basically are like loosening the reins a little bit. So the Delta emulator is basically at this point a Nintendo emulator. So what it means is that you can download this emulator. It has no games. It is just a raw emulator file or app. It has the capability to play games from the NES, from the SNES, from Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, from N64, and it says more to come. ROMs can be extracted from games you own using a little bit of technology, or if you don't necessarily care about copyrights and issues like that, you can certainly find them easily online, although obviously we don't recommend that. They are certainly easy to find. I was able to find a few things that I could sample and try them out, and damned if it doesn't work really well. Some better than others. I have an iPhone 13, so it's pretty good. It's not the newest phone, but it's pretty good, and it ran no problem. I tried putting it onto my iPad. It's not formatted for iPad. It's still an iPhone app, so it's stretched out a little bit, and it definitely, I've got a 6-year-old or 7-year-old iPad, so it runs a little slower and it gets a little clunkier if you have a more technical game. The easier, obviously, the simpler the game. If it's a Nintendo Entertainment System game or a Game Boy game, it runs fine. If you're going up to an N64 game, not as much. But damn, this thing's fun. It worked really well. It was really fun to sort of go in. You can either use touch controls or you can sync up a Bluetooth remote control, and it gives you a long list in the app of what you can sync up. I synced up one of my PlayStation 5 controllers and sat there and played a little NHL 99, gave that a spin to see how it played. And it's neat. It's definitely very cool. And so, again, don't recommend people necessarily do anything to break any copyright laws, but there is certainly a lot of options for where this is going, and hopefully it'll continue. We'll see more emulation software starting to creep its way in so that we can have those kinds of experiences on our Apple devices.
Yeah, this it's been the buzz of the developer community as well. Like the people I hang around with are all buzzing about it this week as well, or last week as well.
Yeah. Have either of you had a chance to look at any of this?
No, I mean, I don't really have any knowledge of games that I would want to play on them anyway. So
I've not
It was
gone
after my time. Hami?
I've not gone down this route, and even if I did, I would probably have to make sure that I was conveniently located near a truck where all of these ROMs fell out in the back that I could use. But it is interesting that as Apple's getting hit and pummeled with these, I think they're calling it gatekeeper statuses in the EU, that they're starting to like, hey, you know what's cool? ROMs, go ahead and emulate. It's totally fine. Like, it's like, oh, so it was a thing you trivially could have done before at any time, but now that you're like, let's not make this worse. Let's appease the people so that people are less angry about our limitations of our walled garden. Yeah, suddenly everything is open for discussion now.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, this is, as I said, this is the number one rated app on the App Store right now. So people are clearly doing this. I have a very extensive catalog of vintage games. So come check me. I've got the credentials, but I don't think a lot of people do. I do wonder if there's a pending litigation coming because, there's an argument to be made. Well, some of these games are not readily available anywhere else, but certainly some of them are. There is a Nintendo online for Switch and stuff like that, wherein you can play vintage games and stuff like that. I do wonder if this is going to end in some kind of lawsuit or litigation with Nintendo or any of the other platform owners or software developers or anyone else as part of this going. But in the meantime, it's a pretty neat little thing.
Cool. Coolio. I mean,
yeah, I got around to watching Super Pumped, the Battle for Uber miniseries on Netflix. It stars Joseph Gordon-Levitt as Travis Kalanick, the former CEO of Uber. It's I think it's a good one if you're, a fan of like The Dropout that covered Theranos and Elizabeth Holmes, or maybe We Crashed that covered Adam Neumann and WeWork from Apple TV Plus. It's kind of in a mood to watch that sort of thing. It's kind of cool to see the drama. These are always, of course, dramatized, right? There's some things that are known. There's some things that get kind of smushed together, just because you don't need a cast of 500 to tell the real story. You want to kind of make it approachable. And, even if you have people saying, hey, I had this phone call with so-and-so, like, you don't know literally what was stated. So take it with a grain of salt and just say that the main beats are probably largely true, but it is a dramatization and it is fun to watch for that drama.
Okay, cool. Well, I guess that's it for another week. So, hey, Jonathan, if people want to get in touch with you, where would they find you?
You can find me on the Twitter and the Instagram as @JPK News, or on YouTube at youtube.com/@JPK.
Okay, cool. And Jaime, if people want to get in touch with you, where would they find you?
I'm on Twitter as @DevWithTheHair.
Right. My name is Timitra, TIMMITRA. On the Twitter machine is where you'll find me until next time. And the Mastodon machine and the Instagram machine. But so until next time, we'll see you in the future. Bye.
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 You've been listening to the Spotcast podcast. If you want to find out more about the podcast or see the episode show notes, visit the Spotcast website at spotcast.com. You can get in touch with us on the website or follow us on Twitter at Spotcast. If you have feedback or questions, send us a tweet with the hashtag AskSpotcast. If you like the show, please consider recommending us to a friend, writing a review on iTunes, or pledging any amount at patreon.com/Spotcast. You can find details on how to help us on our website, spotcast.com/sponsor us. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the future.
Somebody today from the future.
From the future?
From the future, yeah. He's in Sydney. So technically in the future. Yeah, in the future.
Did you ask him for the lotto numbers or whether or not...
I did, I was going to, maybe I should have asked him how the Leaf game turned out. By the way, the Leafs tied it up and, or they won the game, so they tied up the series, and now it's 3-3, which doesn't look good on Boston, if you ask me. But
don't count your chickens.
There is a game 7. Well, I mean, like, what's it been, like 11 years since they've gone past the first series?
No, they did. Last year they beat Tampa Bay in the first round. They finally did get over that hump.
Oh, okay.
They made it to the second round, wherein they got their buttocks kicked by the Florida Panthers. But beating Boston, especially coming back to beat Boston without their best player, because Austin Matthews has been out with a very serious illness for most of the series, would be a pretty huge accomplishment.
Yeah.
That being said, I still don't have any faith because they've just broken me.
They beat you into the ground.
I was watching, I've been enjoying the NBA playoffs for the last couple weeks. The first round of the NBA playoffs. I love NBA basketball, and there's just been a lot of great performances. And I was watching the Knicks game the other night. The Knicks are playing the 76ers, and I was sitting there with my son. We're watching the game. And he said, the broadcasters were talking about just some of the history of the Knicks. And my son said, so what's this about? I said, just imagine the Knicks are the Maple Leafs of basketball. And he was like, oh, okay, got it. And it's so sad that our shorthand for long-suffering fans who are extremely devoted but massively abused can be just instantly like Leaf fans. Everybody's got those, there are those in every sport, but it's sad that Toronto and the Knicks and some of these storied franchises are now these just laughing stocks, these just perpetual jokes, It's been 51 years since the Knicks won a title, but yet it's been almost 60 since the Leafs won, so still. But hey, our women's hockey team is doing great, so there you go.
Yeah. Well, you guys dragged me kicking and screaming into being a Leaf fan, so what can I say?
You should have just stuck with your dad's allegiances. That would have been much more satisfying.
Yeah, and how are they doing in this playoff? Oh, yeah, never mind. They're out.
They didn't even make it. And, it's funny because I do have some Habs fans in my life who are like, oh, we're the greatest. You guys suck. I'm like, when was the last time the Habs won a cup? Oh, that's right. It's been 30 years. 30.
Really?
So not exactly the screaming. That's the last time any Canadian team won a Stanley Cup was 1993. So... Wow. Maybe we shouldn't be necessarily beating our chests over any of this, but Vancouver's off to the next round, it looks like, and Edmonton's off, so hope springs eternal.
Yeah, well, Toronto's almost there.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean the other two have eliminated their teams already?
Tune into next week's episode to hear Tim say, "Stupid Leafs! I can't believe they lost against stupid Leafs."
No, I say that I don't even watch them.
I can't. It just
I told you before.
It just makes me sick to my stomach. I can't even watch it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know who these players are anymore. So yeah, it is what it is.
Yep.
At least we got to go to a game this year.
We did. There's really nothing that is more satisfying than going to a Leafs game when somebody else is paying. That's the best thing ever.
Yeah. Well, we also got to hold up the flag too.
That's true. It's true. We got to be part of the wave the flag across the crowd thing.
Because we were down in the lower bowl where they have in-seat service and stuff. Yeah.
Has the bloom come off the rose, Jaime, for the Kraken yet? Or are people like, I can't believe we have a hockey team?
I don't think it has been embraced as much as the right out of the gate success of the Seattle Sounders FC for MLS. But you still see people getting excited. It was less exciting for the last year and a half or so when we're not doing so well, and Hackstall is out, so there's a little bit of renewed enthusiasm for dreaming what could happen next. The problem was this person. Maybe it's always like that one piece away kind of thing that fans get them into. So as long as we're not trash for a decade or something, because it's so early and you haven't built the long time traditions of stuff, I think there's still a chance here. So my key point for the Kraken ownership would be find a way. You don't have to win the cup, but you really do need to get dangerously close and flirt. get into the playoffs, get deep into the playoffs kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, it's...
Hey, can we go back and talk about the Delta emulator for a minute?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I'm just looking at the download page here. So it's not on the app. Like, how do you get it from the App Store?
You have to put in Delta emulator. Delta doesn't just do it. If you go to the App Store.
Oh, because it's like an alternate store sort of thing?
No. Oh, so are you looking?
Oh, no,
are you looking for the ROMs, or are you looking for the?
No. I'm not. I'm just one. I'm trying so I went because normally when you go to look up an app, I'm looking for the links for the notes, right? So when you download an app, generally there's a link to download it from the App Store. Like, do you get it from the App Store, or how did you?
I got it from the App Store.
How did you find it?
I put in Delta emulator in the App Store.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, if you just put in Delta, there's a whole bunch of things named Delta.
I know. Listen to me for a minute. Normally, there's a link on the site that's got the download from the App Store logo on it, and that takes you to the store. But they don't seem to do that on this website for some reason. So, weird. Okay.
Yeah, I sent you the link from the...
Oh, it's on the alt. Is it on the alt store? But is it also on the Apple store?
I just sent you a text.
Download link.
With the link.
Okay.
Did we talk about Strange New Worlds being renewed for season 4? Because I saw Anson Mount post about that the other day. I'm like, I can't remember if we talked about that at all. I assume
I would bet that we did, because I could have sworn we covered it, but I don't know for a fact that we did.
Yeah. I assume they're just going to do 5 seasons of all these shows now. That's like the cap, right?
Yeah, I kind of wonder... there's only... If they cover roughly a year for each season, there's kind of a limit, because I think we're started at 5 to 7 years before Pike meets his destiny.
Yeah.
It may be 10 years at most. I can't remember exactly how far. It wasn't like, oh, he's got 30 years before he meets his destiny. It's like soonish.
I wonder if we'll see it. I wonder if we'll see it in the show.
We did sort of see it in the show, didn't we?
Well, yeah, we saw him in the first season, sort of, yeah. But then I think we saw it in Discovery, right? We saw it in the second season of Discovery.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder. Oh yeah, we could. I just looked back in our notes. So it was we did it like episode 186, 5 episodes ago. We talked about it, but yeah, I don't know why he was posting about it this week. He's like, "I'm so excited." I'm like, didn't we talk about that?
I don't know.
Yeah.
All right, kids. I think it's time to call it a day and go have some pie and watch another episode of Succession. Yeah. Well, I got to get through it, right? I've got, what is it? 4 seasons?
It's
4 seasons.
4. Yeah. All righty.
Yeah. Yep.
Until next week.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. See you guys.
Bye.
Bye. Later. Bye.
Bye.
Support for this podcast and the following message come from Corient. Corient provides wealth management services centered around you. They focus on exceeding your expectations and simplifying your life. Corient has been helping high achievers just like you enjoy their lives more fully, preserve their wealth, and provide for the people, causes, and communities they care about. As one of the largest integrated fee-only registered investment advisors in the U.S., Corient has deeply experienced teams in 23 strategic locations. Corient has extensive knowledge spanning the full spectrum of planning, investing, lending, and money management disciplines. Leverage Corient's exclusive network of experts to craft custom solutions designed to help you reach your financial goals, no matter how complex they may be. Real wealth requires real solutions. For more information, connect with a wealth advisor today at Corient.com. That's Corient.com. Corient.com.
Hey guys, time to get in on the action for the biggest moments in basketball with Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Just select 2 or more players. Pick more or less on their projections, place your entry, and win up to 100 times your money. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit of up to $100. Just download the Prize Picks app and use the code GET100. That's code GET100 on Prize Picks for a first deposit match of up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more. Pick less. It's that easy.